Hong Kong, British Crown Colony, July 11, 1976. The humid night air clung to everything inside the Lee Theatre, a cavernous venue in Causeway Bay where the spotlights burned like distant suns, casting long shadows across the stage. Maya Itan stood backstage, her heart a steady drumbeat beneath the shimmering sequins of her evening gown, a sapphire blue creation that caught the light like the Mediterranean Sea she hadn't seen in months. At 22, she was Miss Israel, one of 72 contestants vying for the crown. But the roar of the crowd beyond the curtains felt worlds away from the quiet intensity of her thoughts. She adjusted the sash across her chest, fingers brushing the hidden microphone wire taped to her skin, a lifeline to handlers half a world away. Maya wasn't here for glory. Born Miriam Levy in a kibbutz near Haifa, she'd been recruited by Mossad at 18 during her mandatory IDF service, her sharp mind and unassuming beauty marking her for the elite Caesarea unit. "You have the face of an angel and the nerves of a lion," her recruiter had said in a Tel Aviv cafe in 1974, slipping her a dossier on threats brewing in Baghdad. Now, as she waited for her final walk, she thought of her brother, Avi, lost in the Yom Kippur War 3 years earlier. October 6, 1973, when Syrian tanks rolled across the Golan and Egyptian forces breached the Bar-Lev line. Avi had died in a burning Centurion tank, choking on smoke from artillery laced with rumors of chemical agents. The war had cost Israel 2,656 lives, shattered the myth of invincibility, and ignited a paranoia about unconventional weapons that now defined Maya's existence. The global stakes loomed larger than one family's grief. In the aftermath of the 1973 oil embargo, the Middle East simmered with proxy wars and arms races. Iraq, under the iron-fisted Vice President Saddam Hussein since 1968, had accelerated its chemical weapons program, initiated in 1971 with Soviet assistance. By 1974, Project 922, code for the Al-Muthanna state establishment near Samarra, was churning out mustard gas and Taban precursors, drawing on expertise from European firms like Karl Kolb GmbH in West Germany, which supplied dual-use labs under the guise of pesticide production. Israel, still reeling from the war's intelligence failures, viewed Iraq's ambitions as an existential threat. Mossad estimates pegged Baghdad's stockpile at potential tons by 1980, capable of deployment via Scud missiles acquired from the USSR in 1974. Enter Dr. Ahmed Kahani, the program's shadowy architect. 48, educated at MIT in the 1950s on a Ba'ath Party scholarship, Kahani had returned to Iraq in 1963 after the Ramadan Revolution, rising through the ranks of the Military Industrialization Commission. His specialty: organophosphate nerve agents, refining sarin formulas tested in secret facilities outside Fallujah. Intelligence intercepts from January 1975 revealed Kahani's trip to Hong Kong for a clandestine meeting with Chinese intermediaries. Beijing, eager to counter Soviet influence, was offering centrifuge technology and precursor chemicals in exchange for oil concessions. The venue: a luxury suite at the Mandarin Hotel during the Miss Universe pageant, where international dignitaries mingled under the cover of glamour. Maya's mission, Operation Nightingale, had been greenlit by Mossad director Yitzhak Hofi in March 1976. "We can't bomb every lab," Hofi had told her in a secure room at the Glilot compound north of Tel Aviv, "but we can turn their brains against them." The plan: infiltrate the pageant as Miss Israel, win the crown to gain instant celebrity access, then honey-trap Kahani, seduce him, extract intel on suppliers and formulas, and if possible defect him or neutralize him. It was high risk. Failure meant exposure, torture, or worse in Iraqi hands. But Maya had volunteered, driven by Avi's memory and the faces of children in border towns who drilled for gas mask alerts. Backstage, the announcer's voice boomed, "And now the top 5 finalists." Maya's name echoed third, pulling her into the blinding lights. She glided forward, smile perfect, posture regal, but her eyes scanned the VIP section. There, in row 3, sat Kahani, dark suit, wire-rimmed glasses, a faint scar across his cheek from a lab accident in 1972. He was flanked by 2 Iraqi minders and a Chinese delegate, their conversation lost in the applause. Maya locked eyes with him for a split second, a calculated glance that lingered just long enough to intrigue. The questions came fast. Host Bob Barker, with his easy American charm, asked about world peace, a pageant staple. Maya answered in flawless English, her voice steady. Peace isn't just the absence of war. It's justice for those who've suffered its horrors. The crowd erupted. But her mind flashed to training montages. 6 months of pageant prep in a Mossad safe house in Eilat, learning to walk in heels while memorizing chemical formulas. Simulated interrogations where handlers posed as judges, probing for weaknesses, and the emotional gut punch of leaving her parents with a cover story about modeling abroad. As the judges deliberated, a panel including actress Wilma Reading and designer Halston, Maya stood with the others. Venezuela's statuesque beauty, Finland's poised blonde, the vibrant delegates from Trinidad and Thailand. Tension coiled in her gut. Winning wasn't guaranteed. Mossad had greased no wheels, relying on her natural charisma and the pageant's unpredictability. If she placed second, the op shifted to Plan B, a chance encounter at the after-party. The envelope opened. 4th runner-up, Thailand. 3rd, Finland. 2nd, Venezuela. 1st runner-up, Trinidad. And then, Miss Universe 1976 is Miss Israel, Maya Eitan. The theater exploded. Confetti rained down as the crown settled on her head, heavy with rhinestones and responsibility. Anne-Marie Potamo, the outgoing Finnish queen, draped the sash over her shoulders. Maya waved, tears genuine, not from joy but from the weight of what came next. In the wings, her chaperone, actually Mossad operative Rachel Levy, gave a subtle nod. The trap was set. That night, at the coronation ball in the Mandarin Hotel's grand ballroom, Maya moved through the throng like a ghost in silk. Champagne flowed, laughter echoed off crystal chandeliers, but her focus narrowed to Kahani. He lingered near the bar, nursing a scotch, his minders distracted by the festivities. Mossad intel painted him as a widower since 1970, when his wife died in a car bomb, meant for a rival Ba'athist, lonely, intellectual, susceptible to flattery from a beautiful mind. She approached casually, as if drawn by curiosity. Dr. Kahani, I overheard you're a scientist. In Israel, we admire men who push the boundaries of knowledge. Her voice was warm, inviting, laced with the accent she'd softened for the stage. He turned, surprise flickering in his eyes. Miss Eitan, or should I say, Your Majesty, how did you know my name? A queen has her secrets, she replied with a smile, touching his arm lightly. The wire under her gown hummed faintly, transmitting every word to a van parked outside, where analysts in Tel Aviv listened in real time. They talked for hours, superficial at first about Hong Kong's neon skyline and the pageant's chaos, then deeper. His MIT days, her interest in aerodynamics, a cover echoing her real studies. Kahani opened up, the scotch loosening his tongue. He mentioned projects in Baghdad, the thrill of discovery amid political madness. Maya probed gently. What kind of projects? Something that could change the world? He hesitated, glancing at his minders, now engaged with other guests. The kind that ensure survival in a hostile region. But enough about work. Tell me about Israel. Is it true your deserts bloom like gardens? As the night wore on, the human cost weighed on Maya. She thought of Kahani's daughter, a teenager in Baghdad, oblivious to her father's dark work, and her own deception. Every laugh, every lingering gaze, a weapon in a shadow war. But Avi's face in her mind steeled her. This wasn't seduction for sport, it was survival. By dawn, as the party thinned, Kahani slipped her his hotel room number. Join me for breakfast? We scientists must stick together. She nodded, heart racing. The hook was in. Outside, in the humid streets, Rachel waited in a taxi. Good work, she whispered as Maya slid in. Phase 2 begins. But in her room, alone with the crown on the dresser, Maya stared at her reflection, The girl from the kibbutz gazed back, wondering if the line between agent and woman had blurred forever. Hong Kong, July 12, 1976, 09:17 a.m. Mandarin Oriental Hotel, Suite 1812. Maya stepped out of the elevator on the 18th floor, the crown still heavy in her memory even though she had left it locked in the hotel safe. She wore a simple white linen dress, hair loose and still damp from the shower, carrying nothing but a small clutch and the faint scent of jasmine perfume, chosen specifically for its subtlety. The corridor was quiet, except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant clink of room service trolleys. Every step felt measured, deliberate, like walking across a frozen lake she knew might crack at any moment. Suite 1812's door was already ajar. Kahani's voice drifted out, low and courteous, dismissing his minders in Arabic. Maya caught the tail end. A private breakfast with the new queen. No interruptions. The door closed behind the two Iraqis with a soft click. She waited 10 seconds, then knocked twice. Light, playful, the knock of a young woman excited by invitation, not duty. Kahani opened the door himself. He had traded the formal suit for a light gray shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, revealing forearms marked by old chemical burns, pale, mottled scars that told stories no resume ever would. His smile was genuine, almost shy. "Come in, Miss Universe," he said, stepping aside. "I still can't believe I'm entertaining royalty." The suite overlooked Victoria Harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing junks and ferries slicing through emerald water. A breakfast spread waited on a low glass table, fresh mango, croissants, dim sum steamers, a silver pot of Arabic coffee thick as tar. But Maya's eyes swept the room first. Habit, training. No visible bugs, no obvious guards inside. A leather briefcase rested against the sofa, combination lock gleaming. Papers protruded slightly, technical diagrams, she could tell even from 10 feet away. They sat. He poured coffee for her, strong and cardamom-scented, then leaned back, studying her with the curiosity of a man who spent his days dissecting molecules. "You are not what I expected," he said finally. Maya tilted her head, inviting him to continue. "Most beauty queens I've met, and there have been a few, are ornamental. You speak like someone who reads journals, not just magazines." She laughed softly, letting warmth reach her eyes. "I studied aeronautical engineering at the Technion before all this. Planes fascinate me. The way something so heavy defies gravity. It's almost alchemy." Kahani's face lit up. Alchemy. The word was deliberate. Mossad psychologists had profiled him as a romantic about science, a man who saw himself as a modern-day Jabir ibn Hayyan. He leaned forward. "Exactly. Defying nature's laws, but with precision, control. That is what true power is." The conversation flowed like a river finding its channel. He spoke of his years at MIT, late nights in the chem labs, the thrill of synthesizing compounds no one had isolated before. She mirrored him, sharing fabricated stories of wind tunnel tests in Haifa, the poetry of laminar flow. All the while, the tiny transmitter sewn into the hem of her dress captured every syllable, beaming it to the listening post in the Israeli consulate across the harbor. By the second cup of coffee, the barriers thinned. "You know," Kahani said, voice dropping, "Iraq is building something extraordinary, not planes. Something that will make the world respect us. Fear us, perhaps, but respect." Maya let her fingers brush the rim of her cup, feigning fascination. "A weapon?" He hesitated, glanced toward the window as if the harbor itself might be listening. Then a small, proud smile. "Not just a weapon. The Arabs have been humiliated too long. 1948, 1967, 1973. Chemical agents are the poor man's nuclear bomb." Her pulse spiked, but her face remained serene. She leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. Kahani stood, walked to the briefcase, spun the dials, 7319. She noted instantly, and pulled out a thin folder. Inside, hand-drawn schematics of a dissemination device, a cluster munition designed to release aerosolized sarin over a 10-kilometer radius. Beside it, A list of precursor chemicals: methyl phosphonyl difluoride isopropyl alcohol, sourced from suppliers in the Netherlands, West Germany, and, crucially, a new contact in Singapore, arranging shipments via front companies in Panama. Maya memorized every line as he explained, his enthusiasm growing with each revelation. He spoke of production targets: 5 tons of weaponized agent by 1980, of field tests planned in the western desert near Rutba, of Saddam's personal interest, monthly briefings at the Republican Palace. They want oil, we want their HF acid production technology. A fair trade. Maya's blood ran cold. Hydrogen fluoride was critical for uranium hexafluoride conversion, a clear sign Iraq's ambitions stretched beyond chemical to nuclear. She placed her hand lightly on his wrist, feeling the faint tremor of a man unaccustomed to touch. "Ahmed," she said, using his first name for the first time, "you're trusting me with secrets that could get you killed." He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted behind his eyes. Loneliness, perhaps. The isolation of a man whose work demanded silence. "I have no one else to tell," he admitted quietly. "My wife is gone. My daughter thinks I design pesticides. And in Baghdad, trust is a luxury." The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Maya felt the weight of it, the human being beneath the monster. A father, a widower, a scientist proud of his craft, and she, the instrument of his potential destruction. "Then let me be someone you can trust," she whispered. "Completely." She responded, guiding his hands, letting the dress slip from her shoulders, all part of the script. Later, as he slept beside her in the tangled sheets, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling. The briefcase sat open on the desk, contents illuminated by the harbor lights filtering through half-closed blinds. She could photograph everything. 10 minutes, maybe 15 before he stirred. But the risk was astronomical. The minders were in the adjacent suite. One wrong move and she'd never leave this room alive. Maya didn't dare speak. Instead, she reached for Kahani's discarded shirt on the floor, slipped her hand into the pocket, and retrieved his room keycard. A duplicate could be cut in minutes. She waited until his breathing deepened, then slid from the bed, silent as training had made her. At the desk, she angled the papers toward the window light and began committing details to memory. Supplier names, shipment dates, bank account numbers in Zurich. Every second stretched into eternity. When she returned to bed, Kahani stirred, pulling her close in his sleep. She let him, staring into the dark, Avi's face superimposed over the stranger's. Kahani invited her to accompany him to the Chinese meeting, informal drinks at the Captain S bar in the hotel basement. "You'll be my lucky charm," he said with a smile. Mossad command, listening to the invitation via the bug now planted in his briefcase liner, authorized immediate escalation. Maya dressed for the occasion. A crimson cheongsam borrowed from a Hong Kong contact, slit high, hair pinned with a jade clasp that concealed a micro camera. She looked every inch the glamorous companion, but beneath the silk, her skin crawled with the knowledge that tonight could end in blood. As they descended in the elevator, Kahani's hand rested possessively on her waist. He had no idea the woman beside him had already transmitted enough intelligence to trigger airstrikes, if Israel had the reach, or crippling sanctions, if the Americans could be convinced. The captain's bar was dim, jazz piano drifting through cigar smoke. The Chinese delegation waited in a corner booth, 3 men in tailored suits, faces unreadable. Introductions were made. Maya smiled, poured drinks, laughed at the right moments, all while the camera in her hairpin captured faces. Documents slid across the table, whispered figures in Mandarin and Arabic. And then Kahani made his mistake. "After this deal, I could arrange a visit to Baghdad, show you the labs myself. You'd be the first Westerner, well, Israeli, to see what we're building." Maya's heart stopped. He truly didn't know she was Mossad. Parade her as a trophy, then extract whatever secrets she might unwittingly carry. Or worse. She met his gaze, smile unwavering. In the van outside, Rachel S.'s voice was urgent in command. "S, ear. He biting too hard. We need to pull her now. But Tel Aviv's response came back cold and clear. Not yet. One more night. Get the Chinese names confirmed. Then we decide. Extract or eliminate. Maya felt the walls closing in. As Kahani raised a toast to new partnerships, she clinked her glass against his, the crystal ringing like a funeral bell. Hong Kong, July 12, 1976, 23:48. Captain's Bar, Mandarin Oriental Hotel. The jazz trio had shifted to a slow, smoky rendition of Moon River, the saxophone curling through the haze like a secret. Maya sat pressed against Kahani's side in the curved leather booth, her crimson cheongsam riding high on her thigh, one hand resting lightly on his knee. Across the table, the three Chinese delegates, led by a man introduced only as Mr. Liang, smiled with the practiced politeness of men who had negotiated in darker rooms than this. Empty glasses of Mao Tai and single malt whiskey cluttered the table. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the faint metallic tang of ambition. Kahani was flushed, triumphant. The deal was nearly sealed. 500 tons of high-purity hydrogen fluoride precursor in exchange for guaranteed crude deliveries at friendship prices. Liang had just slid a folded sheet across the table. Shipping manifests routed through a shell company in Macau. Maya's hairpin camera clicked silently 3 times as she leaned forward to refill glasses, capturing every line. But beneath the laughter, tension coiled. Kahani's hand tightened on her waist. Maya will join me in Baghdad next month, he announced to the table, voice carrying the careless bravado of too much liquor. She wants to see our facilities, a queen touring the future of Arab science. Liang's eyebrows rose a fraction. The two silent aides exchanged glances. Maya felt the shift instantly. The temperature in the booth dropped several degrees. Baghdad? Liang repeated softly, in English. That would be unusual. Security is very tight. Kahani waved a dismissive hand. For Miss Universe? Doors open. Maya forced a radiant smile, heart hammering. I'm curious about everything, she said lightly. Especially things the world isn't supposed to see. The words hung in the air like a dare. Liang studied her for a long moment, eyes sharp behind gold-rimmed glasses. Then he smiled, thin, polite, utterly unreadable, and raised his glass. To curiosity, then. They drank. But Maya knew the invitation had just become a liability. The Chinese were cautious. They did not like loose variables. And she had just been labeled one. At 0:27, the meeting broke. Handshakes, promises of signed contracts by morning. Liang bowed slightly to Maya. It was an honor, Miss Aiton. Perhaps we will meet again in more official circumstances. The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. In the elevator riding back up, Kahani pulled her close, lips against her ear. You were perfect tonight. They loved you. His breath was hot, whiskey sweet. Tomorrow we celebrate properly, just us. Maya's mind raced. Command had been clear. One more night. But the Chinese reaction changed everything. If Liang suspected her, or even simply disliked the risk Kahani was taking, she could be disappeared before sunrise. Hong Kong was still British soil, but money and influence crossed every border. Back in Suite 1812, Kahani poured nightcaps humming along to the radio, some Cantonese pop song drifting in from the harbor. He was loose, unguarded, dangerous in his affection. Maya excused herself to the bathroom, locked the door and pressed the transmitter trigger twice. Emergency extraction signal. No response. Jamming? Or had the team lost line of sight? She stared at her reflection. Lipstick smudged, eyes too bright. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, Miss Universe playing Russian roulette with a nerve agent architect. When she returned, Kahani was at the desk, briefcase open again. This time he pulled out a small glass vial, clear liquid, no label. A souvenir, he said proudly, holding it to the light. Pure sarin, 1 drop on skin, death in minutes. Beautiful, isn't it? Like poetry in chemical form. Maya's stomach lurched. She crossed the room slowly, every instinct screaming danger. May I hold it? She asked, voice soft. He hesitated, then handed it over, trusting her completely now. The vial was cold, heavier than it looked. She turned it in her fingers, mind calculating. Break it here. Both dead in agony, slip it into her clutch, evidence that could convict Iraq in any international court, or simply keep him talking until extraction arrived. She chose the third. Show me how it works, she whispered, stepping closer. Teach me. Kahani's eyes darkened with desire and pride. He took the vial back, set it carefully on the desk, then pulled her against him. Clothes fell away in a blur of urgency and deception. Maya let it happen, guiding him to the bed, positioning herself so the bedside lamp illuminated the open briefcase, camera in her discarded hairpin still recording from the floor. Afterward, he slept heavily, one arm draped across her. Maya waited 20 minutes, then slipped free. Barefoot, she moved to the desk. The vial sat beside a new document, tomorrow's flight itinerary. Baghdad via Amman, Royal Jordanian Airlines, 2 seats booked. Dr. Ahmed Kahani and guest Miss Maya Aiton. Her blood ran ice cold. This wasn't an invitation anymore. It was abduction. She photographed the itinerary, the manifests, the vial, everything. Then she dressed silently, heart pounding so loud she feared it would wake him. At the door, she paused. Kahani stirred, murmured her name in his sleep. For one terrible second, pity surged. Avi's face superimposed over his. 2 men shaped by war, loss, duty. Different sides, same scars. Then training took over. Rachel was waiting on the parking level, engine running in a nondescript Toyota. Move! Rachel hissed as Maya slid in. Chinese security tailed the delegates. They're asking questions about the Israeli girl. The car screeched out into the night, weaving through neon streets toward the consulate safe route. In the rearview mirror, Maya watched the Mandarin Oriental shrink, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. She didn't know it yet, but at that exact moment, Mr. Liang was on a secure line to Beijing, recommending the Hong Kong deal be aborted, and the Iraqi scientist reined in before he compromised more. And in Suite 1812, Kahani woke to an empty bed, a missing vial and documents slightly out of place. Confusion turned to suspicion, then to cold fury. By dawn, every exit from Hong Kong would be watched. Maya had hours, maybe less, to vanish. As the car sped toward the border checkpoint at Mancom 2, Rachel handed her a new passport. Name, Sarah Cohen. Nationality, Canadian. Occupation, journalist. Your crown's in the trunk, Rachel said grimly. But the pageant's over. Maya stared at the passport photo. A woman with shorter hair, no makeup, eyes older than 22. She closed it and looked out at the approaching dawn. Drive faster, she said. Hong Kong, July 13th, 1976, 05:42 a.m. The Toyota hurtled north along the rain-slicked Castle Peak Road, windshield wipers beating a frantic rhythm against the pre-monsoon downpour. Maya sat in the back seat, new Canadian passport clutched in one hand, the stolen sarin vial wrapped in tissue and buried deep in her clutch. Rachel drove, eyes flicking constantly to the mirrors. 2 cars on our tail since Aberdeen Tunnel, Rachel said quietly. Black Mercedes, tinted windows. Not local police, too clean. Maya leaned forward. Liang's people move fast when they smell trouble. Beyond it lay Shenzhen, then a waiting Mossad extraction team with a light aircraft on a disused airstrip. From there, a hop to Taipei, then home. But 10 minutes was an eternity when you were burned. Rachel pushed the accelerator, weaving past early morning vegetable trucks. The Mercedes kept pace, neither closing nor falling back, just watching. British Hong Kong police in crisp uniforms waved civilian cars through with bored efficiency. Rachel slowed, window down, handing over passports. The officer glanced at the documents. Sarah Cohen, Canadian journalist. Rachel Levy, Israeli pageant chaperone, then at their faces. His eyes lingered on Maya a second too long. Miss Universe, he said with a grin. Big night, eh? Very big. As they crossed the invisible line into mainland China, the Mercedes accelerated hard, pulling alongside. windows rolled down. Two men in the back, Chinese, suits, no expressions. One held up a Polaroid photograph. Maya, in her crimson cheongsam, arm linked with Kahani at the captain's bar. The message was clear. We know. The narrow road twisted through rice paddies and low hills, dawn light bleeding pale across the landscape. The Mercedes stayed close, nudging, trying to force them off. A burst shattered the Toyota's rear window. Maya ducked as glass exploded inward. Rachel yanked the wheel, sending the car skidding onto a dirt track between fields. The Mercedes overshot, braked hard, reversed. "Hold on!" Rachel shouted. She killed the lights and plunged into a bamboo grove, branches whipping the sides. The car bounced over ruts, engine screaming. Maya braced against the seat, clutching the clutch with the vial inside. They burst out the other side onto a levee road running alongside a canal. Ahead, the airstrip, a flat stretch of abandoned paddy marked by two burning oil drums. A single-engine Cessna 206 waited, propeller already turning. Two figures in ponchos waved frantically. Rachel aimed straight for it. The Mercedes roared behind, closing fast. 50 meters. Rachel slammed the brakes sideways, blocking the road. "Go, go!" Maya threw the door open and ran, rain lashing her face, heels sinking into mud. Gunshots cracked behind her, Rachel returning fire with a concealed Beretta. One of the poncho figures grabbed Maya, hauling her toward the plane. She risked a glance back. Rachel was hit, shoulder, blood blooming dark on her jacket, but still firing, forcing the Mercedes to swerve. "Rachel!" Maya screamed. The second poncho man, Eitan, a Caesarea veteran, literally threw Maya into the rear seat. The pilot didn't wait. Throttle forward, tail lifting, lumbering down the makeshift runway as bullets pinged off the fuselage. Maya pressed her face to the window. Rachel stood alone in the rain, emptying her magazine at the Mercedes, buying them seconds. Then the car doors opened and figures emerged. The Cessna lifted, clearing the tree line by feet. Below, Rachel dropped to one knee, then fell forward into the mud. For the next 6 hours, the plane flew low over the South China Sea, skimming waves to avoid radar. They refueled once on a fishing trawler loyal to Taiwanese intelligence, then pushed on to Chiang Kai-shek International Airport outside Taipei. By dusk on July 13th, Maya was on an El Al flight to Lod Airport, disguised as a flight attendant, the sarin vial and microfilm hidden in a sanitary napkin dispenser. She didn't speak the entire journey, just stared out at the black water below, seeing Rachel's blood mixing with rain. In Tel Aviv, the debrief began immediately. Yitzhak Hofi himself waited in the secure room, chain-smoking Rothmans. The vial sat in a lead-lined case on the table, beside developed photographs from Maya's hairpin camera and the copied documents. Analysts had already confirmed the Chinese deal was real, the suppliers named, the production timelines aggressive. "You got more than we dreamed," Hofi said, voice gravel. "Enough to bury Iraq's program for years, if we play it right." Maya sat wrapped in a blanket, eyes hollow. "Rachel?" "She knew the risks," he said finally. "We all do." Rachel had a husband in Beersheba, 2 small boys, a life traded for secrets. "What happens now?" she asked. Hofi leaned forward. "We feed the intel to the Americans, quietly. Carter's people are already nervous about proliferation. They'll lean on the Dutch, the Germans, shut down the suppliers. The Chinese will back off when Langley whispers in their ear. And Kahani," he paused. "We have a welcoming committee." Maya closed her eyes. She saw Kahani's face in the hotel light, proud, lonely, reaching for connection in the wrong arms. "Will he know it was me?" "No," Hofi said firmly, but Maya knew better. Kahani was smart. In his final moments, he would piece it together. The beautiful queen who asked the perfect questions, who vanished with his secrets and his trust. July 15th, 1976, Queen Aliyah International Airport, Amman. Dr. Ahmed Kahani stepped off the Royal Jordanian flight from Hong Kong, bleary from tranquilizers he'd taken to sleep. His minders flanked him, carrying the signed Chinese contracts in diplomatic pouches. He never saw the van pull alongside in the short-term parking garage. 2 silenced shots. Clean. Professional. By the time Iraqi embassy officials arrived, the body was gone. Vanished into the desert. Another unsolved mystery in a region full of them. The world never learned his name. No headlines. No trials. And years later, when Saddam finally unleashed mustard and sarin on Halabja in 1988, the stockpiles were smaller than they might have been. A few thousand lives, perhaps, bought by one woman's crown and another's blood. In Haifa, Maya attended Rachel's funeral in a closed military ceremony. She placed a single jasmine flower on the grave, same scent as the perfume in Hong Kong. Then she disappeared from public life. No interviews, no victory laps. Miss Universe 1976 became a footnote, her reign overshadowed by the next year's winner. But in the quiet corridors of Glylo, her file carried a single handwritten note from Hofi. Operation Nightingale. Success at highest cost, asset irreplaceable. Maya never wore an evening gown again. Haifa, Israel, December 29, 2025, 06:58 a.m. A modest apartment on the slopes of Mount Carmel. Maya Eitan, 71 now, hair silvered, face lined by decades that felt like centuries, stood on her small balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. The winter sun rose pale gold over the water, turning the cargo ships into silhouettes and the distant cranes of Haifa port into delicate sketches against the sky. She held a cup of black coffee in both hands, letting the steam warm her face. On the wrought iron table beside her sat a single white envelope, unsealed, its contents already read a dozen times since the courier had left it under her door the night before. Inside was a photograph, a young woman in her late 20s, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, standing in front of a laboratory clean room at the Weizmann Institute. She wore a white coat, arms crossed, a faint smile that carried echoes of someone Maya had once known too well. On the back, in careful handwriting, "To the woman who made this possible, my grandfather's work ended because of you. Mine begins because the world is safer. Thank you." Dr. Ahmed Kahani, PhD neuroscience. Maya traced the name with her thumb. Kahani, the same bloodline. Ahmed's granddaughter, the daughter of the teenage girl he had mentioned in passing that night in Hong Kong. "My daughter thinks I design pesticides." That girl had grown up, married, raised a child who now dedicated her life to healing brains instead of destroying them. The envelope also contained a second item, a scanned copy of a declassified Mossad memorandum, released quietly the previous week as part of a 50th anniversary transparency initiative, dated July 20, 1976, stamped Top Secret, Nightingale. The final operational summary. Maya had never seen the full file before. Security protocols had kept even her from the complete picture. Now, in the quiet of her retirement, she read it slowly, line by line. The consequences of Operation Nightingale unfolded like ripples across half a century. The sarin vial and microfilm Maya carried out of Hong Kong reached Langley within days, routed through the CIA's Tel Aviv station. Forensic analysis confirmed purity exceeding 95%, proof that Iraq had achieved weapon-grade nerve agent far earlier than Western estimates. The supplier lists, Dutch, German, Singaporean, triggered immediate diplomatic demarches. By September 1976, 3 major chemical firms quietly ceased exports to Baghdad. The Chinese hydrogen fluoride deal collapsed after a discreet warning from the Carter transition team. Beijing, wary of antagonizing the incoming U.S. administration, redirected the shipment to Pakistan instead. Iraq's Project 922 staggered. Production targets slipped by years. When the Iran-Iraq War erupted in 1980, Saddam's chemical arsenal was smaller, cruder, less reliable than it would have been. Mustard gas and primitive taboon were used on the battlefield and against Kurdish villages, but the more lethal sarin stockpiles remained limited. Historians later estimated that the delays saved tens of thousands of Iranian lives and prevented Saddam from escalating to nerve agents against Israeli cities during the 1991 Gulf War Scud attacks. Kahani's elimination in Amman sent shockwaves through Baghdad's scientific elite. Replacements were competent but cautious. Paranoia stifled innovation. The program limped forward under tighter security, but the bold international networks of the mid-1970s were never fully rebuilt. Maya set the memorandum down and looked out at the sea again. She thought of Rachel, buried in Beersheba, with full military honors that meant nothing to her two boys, who grew up believing their mother died in a car accident abroad. She thought of the Miss Universe crown, locked away in a museum storage vault, its rhinestones gathering dust. She thought of the nights she had woken screaming in the years after 1976, Kahani's face dissolving into gas clouds, Rachel's blood washing away in tropical rain. And she thought of the choices. In 1978, when Mossad offered her a desk job, analysis, recruitment, she refused. She left the service entirely, married a quiet engineer from the kibbutz days, raised two daughters who knew nothing of crowns or nerve agents. She taught high school biology for 30 years, watching teenagers dissect flowers and frogs, marveling at the fragility of life. Her husband died in 2012, cancer, gentle and quick. The girls lived in California now, with grandchildren she saw on screens. But the past had a way of finding her. In 1991, during the Gulf War, when Scud sirens wailed over Haifa and families sealed rooms with plastic sheeting, Maya sat in her basement with her daughters and felt the old terror rise. Only then did she allow herself to wonder, did I bias this time? When the war ended with no chemical strike on Israel, she wept alone in the dark. In 2003, when American tanks rolled into Baghdad and inspectors finally entered Al-Muthanna, they found rusted shells in abandoned labs, but no massive stockpiles. The world called it an intelligence failure. Maya knew better. And now, in 2025, with the Middle East once again teetering, Iran's nuclear program advancing, proxy wars flaring, new generations of scientists wrestling with the same temptations, Ahmed Kahani had found her. The young woman's letter, included with the photograph, was longer. I grew up hearing whispers about my grandfather. Officially, he died in a car accident in Jordan. My father never believed it. He hated the regime, left Iraq in 1982, settled in Canada. He told me grandfather was brilliant but misguided, building weapons because he thought strength was the only language the world respected. When the Mossad file was declassified last week, my father called me crying. He finally understood why the accident was staged, why the suppliers dried up overnight. He understood someone stopped a nightmare before it fully woke. I study the brain now, how fear and trauma shape decisions across generations. I want to break the cycle grandfather helped start. If you are still alive, if you are the woman the file calls Asset Nightingale, please know. Your courage echoes in lives you will never meet. Mine included. I wish I could thank you in person, but I know why I can't. The roses you once smelled in a faraway hotel are still blooming somewhere. With deepest respect, Layla Maya folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope with the photograph. She walked inside, opened the old wooden box she kept on the highest shelf, the one no one in the family was allowed to touch. Inside, the faded Miss Universe sash, yellowed with age, a single jasmine petal pressed between glass, and Rachel's last message, scrawled on a scrap of paper in the Toyota before the border. Tell my boys I loved them. She added Layla's photograph and letter to the collection, closed the lid. Then she returned to the balcony. The sun was fully up now, glinting off the waves. Somewhere out there, cargo ships carried chemicals and dreams and dangers, just as they had 50 years ago. The shadow war never ended. It only changed faces. But today, in this quiet moment, Maya allowed herself something she had rarely permitted: peace. She raised her coffee cup toward the horizon, a silent toast to Rachel, to Avi, to the girl she had been, to the woman who had carried secrets heavy enough to crush nations and still chose life. The sea answered with its endless rhythm, and for the first time in decades, Maya Aiton smiled without shadows. The roses, wherever they were still blooming,